to the Delusion Rehab podcast. My name is Lauren, and if this is the first delusion you're jumping into, know that this is a pod fully dedicated to helping others come to their own reality checks, hopefully a little quicker than I did, about delusions that steal our joy and don't have us living our best lives. I think on paper, I've always known that I'd believe lies, and one of the greatest lies is imposter syndrome, and we are going to jump into part two. But before I do that, we got to reveal the first Amazon gift card winner of the Delusion Rehab podcast. And the winner of this month is Carrie Trotta. Yes, she is an extended family member of mine. Shocker that a family member would be one of the first to support my podcast. That's how all good podcasts start, right? But she has specifically gone out of her way to support me, sending messages and feedback about topics that she'd like to hear about and things that resonate with her and her business career. So I have to say, this is a pretty perfect winner for this week, if I do say so, Carrie, because as we do both work for Fortune 500s, it is so easy to get into imposter syndrome. And I probably find myself pulling myself out of it weekly at some point in time. So again, if you want to win in the months coming forward, know that you can put your comments in the Spotify or Apple podcast. You can go follow me in Facebook and Instagram at the Delusion Rehab Podcast and get yourself some entries to win some Amazon money next month. All right, guys, part two on the phenomenon of imposter syndrome. Boy, did I end up with some of the best possible content to share with you guys today. I just came back from my trip to the GrowthDay Conference in Austin, Texas. I was there from Thursday through Saturday. Not only was it very helpful for me to get my mind off of obligation, professional obligation, all the things I have to do at home, things in the other areas of my life that I do prioritize, just some rest and some reflection time. I can say that I do daily have reflection, in my car, in the morning when I'm first waking up and journaling, and even at night when I'm getting ready to go to bed. But there's just something about going to another place entirely. In this case, I did fly 4 hours to get to Austin to be around people that want to grow. It is not often that people do. And if you're listening to this podcast, you are in the realm of people that do want to grow in some way, shape, or form in some aspect of their life. And so, why was I even there? Why did I even find out about it? So, many of you know from my past that I have been affiliated with Body, better known as Beachbody, since 2018. So, it's been a part of my life now for like 7 years. I was saying 5 and 6 for so long, but it's been quite a while. It fully converted me over to working out from home. I feel so much more comfortable with the idea of working on myself in the privacy of my home and having the flexibility to do that. And I still use the workouts. This is the thing. The business changed back in October, and people that had made this their full time career were left in the dust and they didn't know how quite to feel about it. I feel like the tone has maybe changed a bit in the community, so to speak, but in reality, I think it gave all of us an internal check on where do we feel we most authentically share our journey, share on social, share with others of this one particular aspect of life that we do like to grow in. And for all of those that I went on this trip with, it was our internal alignment to be there because we all want to personally grow and develop ourselves forward in every aspect of life, even if one little shark bite at a time. And the conference was amazing in terms of who was there to present information and present lots of different topics that I think no one in the room could escape in terms of them feeling that way in their life. It was led by one of the leading professional development coaches in the world, Brendan Burchard, and he even had Natalie Ellis from Boss Babe there and another speaker I really love, Ed Milet. I don't know if you've listened to his podcast, but he really does have great, great content on there. He's another high performance inspiration. And to have all three of them and others there for 3 full 8-hour days of combining faith with business, productivity, and strategies to living a more joyful life, it was just the best. Lots of tears, happy tears, of just reflecting on what I've overcome, what I'm in the middle now that does feel like a challenge, and then even just the happy tears to know that all of this will make sense to me at some point, even if it's in the afterlife, even if I have to go home to Jesus to have him tell me what made it necessary for me to go through those hardships. But it was a blessing to be there, and I've met so many new friends, and my heart is so full. One of the greatest pieces of content that was brought up multiple times every day at every session was that we should consistently activate and summon the best of us and make that the first job that we tackle each day. And that will turn into small everyday changes that lead us to a life we would much rather be living, right? But what's so interesting is that the current delusion we're working on right now is about imposter syndrome, which again is that psychological phenomenon where we feel like a fraud just because we don't feel legitimate in our own success and we have a fear of not being seen in the proper light. Well, when you think about activating and summoning the best of yourself, that's going to require showing parts of yourself that others don't have. We're just all so unique. I think I Googled it the other day. We're officially in the 8+ billion people in the world marker. Um, and that gave me perspective on how it is insane that all of us could be as unique as we are and not have any carbon copies. And yet we're being told to do this while simultaneously feeling like we don't belong in the spaces we're in. And that delusion that we brought up last week was the level of confidence in what I do dictates my right to be there. And we know confidence is very fluctuating. You can walk in one day and feel great, and you can walk in the next day and feel like trash. And I have been both things typically in the same week. Some might say that I'm more prone to that because I have ADHD and Tourette syndrome tendencies, but I don't think that I am that unique in that quality. I think we can very easily go from either end of the spectrum. And so, as I was listening to all this amazing content at this conference, I was being given easily writable quotes, like quotable quotes to take with me for the rest of my career. And imposter syndrome kept being used as a specific phrase. So it showed up without me even asking for it, although I knew somehow it was going to be there. And there were three main topics that I thought made the most impact in my life while I was listening to it, in why imposter syndrome exists and how to learn how to distance myself from those feelings. So the first thing that hit me: we are not supposed to believe that we are our history. You and I are not our history. I think on the people in my life who have only known me in past seasons, maybe they stopped seeing me when I left college or left high school or um, transitioned jobs, moved out of different towns. And I think like that's the last version of me they saw. That's going to haunt me, right? In my head, I'm like, that's going to get back to me. Someone's going to remember my 18-year-old self and they're going to see me in my 30s and be like, thinking I'm the same B word I was back then. Um, and no, that doesn't feel good. I don't want to identify myself to my past self anymore. It maybe was the same Lauren in body and mind, but my soul has drastically changed since then, and it is reflecting into my mind of how I choose to think and act. So I have to remember that my history is not his story. It's not God's story for my life. I know he must have put me in these places to get me to a place that I was able to be equipped for what he called me to do. I brought that topic up, I think, in the last pod too, that he does not call the equipped, he equips the called. He puts you in positions because he knows that you have a very special quality to add to that. And it's only in bringing the experience of gaining that talent, gaining that competency in how you carry that out, that's going to bring you to that next level. And sometimes it takes us in weird positions. Some of the jobs I've had, I'm like, why am I here? My very first job was at a deli in the local local grocery store. Um, Very rural Pennsylvania thing to do as an 18-year-old. And I learned how terrible customers can be to those that are serving them. And to this day, I think that I walked away from that scenario knowing how to respectfully speak back to someone that is fully freaking out that I did not slice their turkey thin enough. Um, that same concept doesn't fully translate into the business world, but there are plenty of people that don't think that we're doing the right things. And it's all based off of their own perception, right? And sometimes those people aren't even our direct managers. They're just onlookers or other coworkers that seem to have opinions that they want to share at any given moment. So take heart that even if you're in a position like that, that has you feeling unworthy or has you feeling confused as to how you could even end up in the career you're in or how you could even end up in the role that you find yourself today, know that that's going to be something to grow and learn from no matter what. And if you choose to let that teach you, it will only help you chase what's coming. Chasing dreams, it sounds so cliche, but it was a huge backbone to the conference because all of the growth is meant for you to walk into a life of gaining that dream and fully living presently and joyfully in it, because we can spend all of our time racing towards an end goal and it might not even matter in the end to us because we've been so caught up in the logistics of it and in the attainment of it that we can't even sit in the beautiful moment that exists at the end to say, wow, I actually did it and I can actually now sit in it and enjoy it. So keep in mind, if you think of yourself as the past self, yeah, you're not going to think that that past self is deserving of any of this current life, any of these roles. Just because of the role I explained as a deli clerk seemed a little odd for my career path. I mean, everyone starts with a job like that. But I think that sometimes I look at myself in my inventory planner job and I think I'm just the deli clerk that can't get the turkey order right. And I hope that makes sense to you. But I do think that's a true spiral that we put ourselves into in getting around our emotions that we should have. We should have emotions of pride in everything we do when we put our best foot forward. But when our history comes to haunt us, we don't feel so worthy. So, in the discomfort of this moment, just know that the growth will lead you to something better that you won't question later down the line. All right, point number 2. This might seem a little unheard of in terms of connecting it to imposter syndrome, but hear me out because this came up at the conference and I wrote more notes on this than I anticipated. What if we just don't want to be misunderstood by those that we're around the most? I mean, professionally, I have a lot of examples of this. I look at my credentials on paper and I feel like I'm an imposter because I'm not doing something right in the process of a normal day at the business. And I think I must be so inferior and stupid. And truthfully, looking back, I was pretty well undertrained. Let's put it this way. I mean, I don't know why I was expected to mind read, but I was fully gaslit into believing that I was supposed to know how to do this stuff. And just because I had a degree in accounting and finance, that should have been the prerequisite for me knowing how exactly to do something the way somebody wanted it done. That's truly ridiculous. And people like that can sometimes be the instigators of the imposter syndrome because they slap a reason on why you're not their favorite person using your identity instead of the reality of the situation where you're just not being trained. Anybody needs to be trained no matter what position they're in. They could be the CEO of the company and they would still need to know how to freaking save it down a PDF if you hear me on that. But here's a personal example of imposter syndrome that is relating to interacting with loved ones, people we most want to see us in a good light. This will be a podcast all its own in the future, but I was a COVID bride in 2020. It was probably to this day, the hardest thing I've had to do in terms of being my type A planner self and having to have no other choice but to go with the flow. And by that, I mean go with whatever the Connecticut government decided was appropriate at that given time. And knowing that my wedding would have to be massively cut down to basically the 8 family members that were immediate and the 15 or 16 people in the wedding party and the pastor. Um, in the middle of that insane amount of planning, not to mention Hurricane Isaias came that same week, and it actually shut down power for most of the state for like 7 days, and all of our vendors were backing out, and the venue was trying its best but was like, "Yeah, we don't know what we're gonna be able to do for you." And when I was at the peak of my pain, David and I had a very hard conversation where I said to him, I've always dreamt of this being my turn. And I didn't know if I'd have a turn, and I did. But I told David that I was doubting God's love for me in this. I knew that the entire world was shaken by this, but for some reason, Lauren Trotta, then Lauren Wenner, thought I'm the only one experiencing this. Even when I was in Facebook groups of like thousands of people and hundreds of couples in Connecticut that were getting married in 2020 that all had the same situation, I just kept blaming God. And no, that was not my finest hour. It was also not my best emotion. So I have to give myself grace on that. But the problem was that because I was so adamant that I did not feel God's love, David was worried that I had kind of been pulling an imposter syndrome scheme on him most of our dating life, because he's like, wait, are you serious? Like, is your faith in God not as strong as I thought it was? Like, are you not who you said you were? And he's the closest person to me. And I thought, well, wait. In this one imperfect moment I'm having, that I'm not perfectly communicating my feelings, or that I'm just being exaggerant, that he's going to think that I don't really align with him anymore and he's going to break it off. I mean, it was very scary. There was like a 2 or 3 day period of us just really having to talk this through. And I think to myself, no matter if it's professional or personal, how many times do we think that this happens to us, that someone's get a wrong impression of us because they just chalk us up to whatever mistakes they see in the moment, or whatever they see at the time that is just not our prettiest picture. It's just not our best side. It's tough for me to do this and to learn that this is the best way to approach it, but I have been doing this more. And I think that this is the way to combat this feeling of, what if I feel like I can't make any mistakes because a mistake would mean that I'm an imposter? Here's what I've been doing. In the example of me sending emails without attachments, which I can't tell you the number of times I've done that in the calendar year 2025, where I've said, oops, sorry, I meant to attach this thing. Um, I've just decided to pick fun on myself, and not for the purpose of putting myself down, but for the purpose of showing people that I can laugh at my own mistakes. Um, so, I'll send an email saying, haha, Monday, right? Here's the attachment. Or, man, it's just one of those days, and just being human enough to say, I'm having a bit of an off day. Tomorrow will be better. When you approach it as that this doesn't make you an imposter, this just makes you a human, I think other people give that impression back to you. So if you're feeling like this is from gaslighting behavior to you, of, well, if you make any mistakes in my presence, you're clearly not supposed to be here. Okay, well, that is freaking ridiculous. But we do think that. We do get in that spiral of like, they will just think so much less of me because I mistyped a word in the email, or because I stuttered in the middle of a presentation with a vendor, or something crazy like that. And poking fun at yourself, not only does it lift the humor a little bit, but it's also just being present with your own human nature, which can be really hard as a perfectionist and someone that really tries hard at whatever they do, because those are the same people that end up with imposter syndrome more often than not. All right. Third big takeaway. This one came at a very good time because I did mention something about this last week, and it was actually it probably had 30 minutes of time dedicated to it. The question I asked last week was, could the feeling of imposter syndrome really be misalignment to what you really want, because the true role that you should have feels too scary? So are you intentionally choosing to live safe options because you wouldn't want to feel like an imposter? So I told myself I'd be open and honest about this portion, as I always attempt to be, but I'm being verbal about it when I start, because it is not an easy thing for me to talk about. It is the relationships I've had in the past. Some of the relationships I've had have honestly made me feel safe because of the lack of me feeling like I had to push myself or be better. Misalignment in social situations is probably one of the worst things you could do to your psyche, because it teaches you that the people that you're around are simply the best you could have. And while I love everyone I meet and have such a tough time walking away from anybody for any reason, the last 5 years of my life, especially, has been me walking away from things that I used to fully place my identity in because it felt good to be identified as a fun friend to be around, even when I was faking it the whole time. It's not to say I couldn't have found friendships that really did build me up and really did have me feel strengthened, but I think I just knew, if I feel like an imposter, it's only because I want to give them more than I give myself. I want to give these people more so that they will like me more. I have been addicted to this song called Mastermind by Taylor Swift. I'll absolutely link it in here because it's not one of the ones that's like the most popular. I found myself to be quite a T Swift fan in the last couple years. I denied it at first, and no, I did not go to see her concert, but I've streamed it a couple times on my television. And one of her songs is called Mastermind. It has a very distinct line that says, "No one wanted to play with me as a little kid, so I've been scheming like a criminal ever since." And the bridge finishes with, "I'm only cryptic and Machiavellian because I care." When you care about something enough that you think should be in your life, whether it's a person, a job, a possession, maybe it's a home or a location you've chosen to live, a church family you're with, it is so hard to think that you would want to go through the vetting process again of, is there something better for me in this phase of my life? It almost feels like I can look back at my history and say, wow, I feel like such an imposter. I don't even know who that girl was that dated that guy. I don't even know who that girl was that lived in Jersey. I don't even know who that girl was that decided to work at that job that basically told her her Tourette syndrome was a lie. Like, yeah, I don't know why I feel like that either. But I also recognize, like, girl, the reason you feel like that is because you have grown so much in the last 7 to 8 years that you're almost unrecognizable. So I actually take this point of imposter syndrome as a really good thing. Like, if I think of myself as a 7 to 8 year old, yeah, not 8 year old, 7 to 8 year old ago self, I think, like, yeah, no, that is not me. There were a lot of core parts of me that still exist, but the behaviors and the ways that I treated people and what I chose to sacrifice for jobs and people that didn't care about me as much reciprocally. It's just, it doesn't make sense, does it? But I can take heart and hope in the fact that if I've grown this much in the last 7 to 8 years, and I'm not saying I didn't try, but I had a lot less of a mindset of wanting to go for it. Like, what will the next decade look like? What will it look like when I'm 43? I certainly hope so much growth has come along, and I know it. But if I get myself locked into the thought, that delusion of imposter syndrome being my story, then yeah, I'm gonna be downhearted and I'm gonna feel sad. But it's most important that I remember that imposter syndrome is for those that want to belong and sometimes don't feel like they should, either because they don't deserve it or because people around them are giving bad signs and signals. But we don't have to live like that anymore. And I think that it's called a syndrome because it can be very, very easy to step out of it if we choose to take another psychological approach and feel the feelings, but remember that it's not the reality of our situation. So I want to leave you with two songs, as I always do. The first song is called Flowers by Samantha Ebert. So back in July of this past year, I was really peaking at my postpartum anxiety and depression stage. And honestly, much of it was brought on by social triggers that I knew would come to me one day to remind me about a lot of that history that I was talking about. And after years of not thinking about those things and successfully ignoring them for quite a while, I thought very often what the lyrics to the song say of, Lord, why are you keeping me here? And imposter syndrome is a lot like that, asking yourself, I don't feel good here. Why am I here? I don't physically like being where I am. Why am I here? And the lyrics come around to tell you that one day you'll be thankful that all of the seeds of challenge were planted back then, because they'll grow into the flowers you will one day see and the beauty that will rise from the ashes of things you have no understanding of right now. But you can have heart that it will make sense one day. Even like I said, if you have to get to heaven and ask the Lord, you'll understand. The second song is This Is Me from The Greatest Showman. I'm shocked as to how this movie kind of came back on the scene. Made a bit of a comeback in terms of the soundtrack. I just hear it so much more than even the year that the movie came out. It speaks so strongly to being brave and being yourself and living in your uniqueness. I wrote so many notes and journal entries in the last week, especially on the plane, of what I had let myself believe for so long, and that was that my uniqueness was a weakness. Uniqueness is a strength. Now, you find yourself in places that people will consider it a weakness, yet you have to find the environment and have faith in the fact that there are places that you are valued, that you can make more impact where you are most aligned. And just because you have situations of which you're more misaligned, it doesn't mean that you were on the wrong path from the get go. It means you probably needed to figure out what misalignment felt like, if I'm honest. I don't think I knew what misalignment felt like until I thought and said out loud, I'm doing a freaking good job. And I don't know why people are acting like I killed somebody. Like, people really thought that I was like messing up a lot, and I thought, I can't possibly be messing up any more than anyone else is on any other given day. But, you know, that uniqueness of myself was just not seen well. It was not highlighted in the best possible place. And so this song, This Is Me, talks all about, getting after it. Look out, because here I come. Um, you know, might be bruised, might be broken down from a lot of conversations, but you will rise and you'll stand up more than you fall. So, a takeaway to finish out the pod, authenticity is the most true when it's the furthest away from those around you. Like, you can feel how authentic you are when everyone around you is like, oh, that's awkward. Why are you saying that? Why are you being too real or, a little bit too raw? And Of course, authenticity feels hardest then because it's not always relatable. And sometimes it's also very relatable, but people don't want to admit it around you. It can work both ways. But take time to think about what authenticity means to you and what's been uncomfortable for you to be choosing lately. Have you been making choices that go against yourself? And that's why you've been feeling like an imposter because perhaps you are. You're living as someone you're not supposed to live as. You're living as someone you're not supposed to live as. That truly can be an imposter. But again, it's not to shame it. It's to say, then girlfriend, get out of it. Figure out how to make it more about what you want to leave as impact in this world, what God's called you to be, and what you also know you could be finding better quality of life and value in and make a change. And if all else fails in that positive thinking, take this one thing from me today. We simply cannot be blessed in the positions we have if we aren't meant for them. Thank you for listening today. I hope you feel inspired to continue in your growth journey, to work out these delusions that hold us back from being our best selves. Until next time.